Today I'm going to show you a few top secret tricks for supercharging detail in your photographs. For some of you, this is going to be all new information. For others, well, let me put it this way. If the first stuff seems familiar, the second stuff is going to blow you away. I'm going to start things off with a high contrast photograph, specifically this owl from the Dreamtime image library, link in the description, and then we'll see how things work with a typical portrait shot. All right, I'm in Photoshop, so I'll go up to the filter menu and choose Camera Raw filter. However, you could just as easily apply Camera Raw or Lightroom directly to a RAW photograph or a JPEG, what have you. In any event, you'll get these same options. Now, I'm going to zoom in so that we can talk. I know some of you already know this stuff. We're going to talk about detail. And specifically, we'll start things off with high frequency detail, which is areas of rapid luminance transition. So where these feathers are concerned, if you can count things off as bright, dark, bright, dark, bright, dark, that is high frequency detail. If it goes more slowly, if you're moving your cursor along and it's like dark and then it's light, that is low frequency detail, by the way, even along the lip of the eye. We'll see what that means in just a moment. But for now, I'm going to attack that high frequency detail with these detail options right here, specifically sharpening. So I'll just go ahead and crank that guy up to its absolute maximum, and you can see that those edges are enhanced. And in case you can't see that, watch very closely. This is before and this is after. It's pretty subtle so far, which is why we have these support options right here. You're going to get a better sense for how they work if you press and hold the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac as you drag one of these sliders. So notice radius is tracing halos around the edges, around those high frequency edges, and the halos become more and more pronounced as you increase the value. Do you see that? And you can see it that much better because you have the Alt or Option key down. Otherwise, you'd see all that color. It's a little bit distracting, whereas without the color, you can really see the detail. Speaking of which, let's talk about detail right here. If so far we've been attacking, if you will, the high frequency detail, well, detail is the super high frequency detail. It's another pass of sharpening, by the way. And watch what happens. I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac. See how I'm just micro sharpening the heck. It's like we're looking at a haystack at this point, but we also have a lot of noise. This area over here, I want you to look at it. Notice how I'm bringing out the noise like crazy, whereas if I move this value down, I'm not sharpening the noise to the same extent. Now, by default, I've said this a million times. By default, 25 is way too high. I've complained about this since I was a child. It's insane that this is the default setting Adobe. It should be 0 because most people don't want to sharpen the noise inside of a photograph. However, you might want to take it up to, well, where this owl is concerned, it's pretty forgiving. So I might try something like 15. Now, here's the money option right here, masking. Notice if you Alt or Option drag, once again, you have to do that because otherwise you won't see what's going on. Notice that we're seeing these white areas that are giving way to black areas, as you can see. The black stuff will not get sharpened, by the way. Those are non-edges that will not get sharpened, whereas the black things will get sharpened. Those are the edges, and then we have these soft transitions in between, which is awesome. I wish we had this with everything, frankly. This is one of the best features in Camera Raw, but I'll take it to 80, let's say, and that way we're just sharpening the high frequency edges inside the image. And by the way, if you're enjoying this so far, it's about to get so much better. Seriously, take a quick moment to subscribe. All right, now let's take on the low and medium frequency details, which we do by bringing up the effects options right there. Texture hits the medium frequency stuff and clarity hits the low frequency stuff, which you can see if you just drag these guys around, but you can't Alt or Option drag them. That doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. I mean, you can, of course, press the Alt key all you want. It just won't have any effect. But do you see what's going on? I am increasing the contrast around the low frequency stuff, specifically that iris transitioning into the pupil right there. However, and I just stumbled on this, I've never seen this demonstrated in my life. If you take down the dehaze value just for a second, we're not leaving it there, but notice if you take it down, then you can actually make out the halos. The dehaze is taking the chroma temporarily out of the image. It doesn't get rid of it entirely, but it does help us to separate the detail from the chaff. And so in this case, we can see the halos like crazy where clarity is concerned. Notice that. And they go away when you take this value down. And it almost is if the halos are inverted, as you can see right here, and we end up with this kind of Vaseline effect. Generally undesirable, but you might try it out occasionally. In any event, I'm going to change clarity back to 0 for a second so I can show you where texture is concerned. The differences can be a little less obvious, especially when working on portrait shots, we'll see, in which case just take the dehaze value up a little bit and then try playing with that texture value. In any event, for the owl, I'm going to take this guy up to 50, let's say, and then I'll take dehaze down so I can really see clarity, and I'll take it up to 50 as well. I'm not taking them to the same value for any specific reason that is. I just like the way it looks. And then once I'm done, I would return that dehaze value to 0. And that way, between sharpening, texture, and clarity, I have independent control over the high, medium, and low frequency details inside the image. Now, at this point, you may think, oh my gosh, Deke, this is so cool. Problem is, these days, very few of my clients are owls. And so let's take a look at how things work in a portrait shot. This is a raw image, by the way, once again from Dreams Time. If I were to click on detail right here, you can see that Camera Raw's already applied some default settings, which are just fine. So let's move on to effects where we have texture and clarity. Now, texture is great for texture that you want to emphasize. However, it's not so great on stuff that you'd like to keep smooth, like skin details. It's heck on pores, that is to say. So you can see, even though this woman is very young, she doesn't really benefit from additional texture, whereas she might from less texture, but I'd be crazy to turn it down that low because it'd be obvious I had edited the image. So I'll just return that to 0 for now. And then we have clarity, which is going to bring out that low frequency detail, especially around the dark areas in her hair, around the shadow detail, and that transition right there, which is very slow between the dark portion of her hair and the light portion of her skin. And so think of this as being a very selective kind of contrast. Hey, real quick, that's one very special, never before revealed use for dehaze. Want to see more? Then join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/DekeNow. And now, more ways to modify frequency by frequency details inside Camera Raw. In any event, I'm going to take it back down to 0 so we can take advantage of that trick, which is to take dehaze all the way down to -100. It really helps us focus on the detail independently of the chroma and the stuff we don't need to worry about, the stuff that doesn't really have any contrast, the non-edges, in other words. And now notice if I crank up that clarity value, I am seeing very pronounced halos around the low frequency details. And if I take that value down, it's almost like I'm inverting the effect. However, if I were to bring dehaze back up, you can see it's like a big dollop of Vaseline on the lens, which is not what I want. So I'll take dehaze down again, and that way I can really judge what it is I want to do with this clarity value. Now, I don't want to take it up this high. However, I do want to keep it pretty high where this image is concerned. So I'll go with +50, just like I did with the owl. That's a coincidence, of course. Now, if I were to modify the texture value, notice that it's kind of hard to make it out. Can you see that? Whereas, if that happens to you, and this is common with portrait shots in my experience so far, then take the dehaze value up to something around 50. It doesn't have to exactly be -50, by the way, but that will work. At which point now you can see the difference between a very high texture value and a very low texture value. And you can make out that texture independently, once again, of the chroma inside the image, the color.
that is to say. And so I'll go ahead and take this texture value down to -20. Let's say this time. And now you can use dehaze as its own kind of edge control. Now, in this case, you're going to bring out what's known as volumetric details. So pay attention to her lips, for example, and her cheek right here. Notice how as I increase that dehaze value, we have more pronounced rounding. But we're also bringing out things like the pores on her nose and her lips and so forth, the very fine hairs under her bottom lip. And so, of course, you wouldn't want to go this high. It also brings out all kinds of saturation. What I'm going to do is take it down a little bit to -10. Now, I warn you, whereas the owl, we saw big differences. This is a portrait shot. You would never apply those kinds of extreme modifications to a portrait. And so this is going to be a little more subtle. And so I'll click and hold on the eye right here. This is before and this is after. So as you can see, we're bringing out more contrast specifically around the shadow and highlight details. And so what I'm going to do is zoom in on her eye right here, as well as this area of hair, and you can see the difference. This is before and this is after.
So what do you think? Was that the most mind-expanding thing you've ever seen? Or is your mind pretty much the same size it ever was? Either way, comment below. And then subscribe and turn on notifications. And for some more ways to get the most out of texture, clarity, and dehaze, join me at patreon.com/DeekNow. And then go to Deek.com and sign up for my newsletter. I'm Deke McClellan. This is Deek Now.